Hi, I'm Richard, the founder of 10 Adventures, and this is the 10 Adventures podcast. Each week we talk to real people about real adventures as they explore this incredible planet we all live on. This episode is incredible. We're talking with Charles Dement about his journey on the Appalachian Trail. He lost over 100 pounds, found love, and had a life-changing experience that is sure to inspire you. Joining me for this episode is Karen, a colleague here at 10 Adventures, who is also a world explorer and a doctor. Karen, how's it going?
Pretty good. Can't complain.
We have a really interesting guest today. We're going to learn about one of the epic trails and also about weight loss. And you've done some pretty big trips. Did you find you lost a lot of weight on, your big bike trips you've done or any of your big hikes?
Not on any of the big bike trips. The only time I may have lost some weight was in Nepal, mainly because of altitude. Like, it just devastated my appetite.
I thought you were going to say something else there.
No.
It's funny. I did a big Thru-Hike in 2009, and I thought I was going to lose a ton of weight. And I came back to Canada. I'd lost 2 pounds after basically hiking every day for a month. So I was really let down. Luckily today we're going to hear from Charles Dement, who has a great story about the Appalachian Trail and his hike, where he had a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on as well as losing some weight. Now, Charles is an aspiring writer. He's currently working on a book about his Thru-Hike, and he also has some fiction stories in mind that he's going to work on as well. He describes hiking the AT as being a revelation for him, and it's the first of what he hopes to be many other long-distance trails. He's currently based in Arkansas, but moving up to Rhode Island soon, where he's going to live with his girlfriend, who he met on the trail the second day, and they hiked the rest of the trail together. Right now, he's working a soul-crushing office job and yearning for his next trip. Hello, Charles. How's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. To start off, can you tell people what the Appalachian Trail is? For a lot of people who maybe don't know what it is.
So the Appalachian Trail is a roughly 2,200 mile foot traffic only hiking trail that spans 14 states, pretty much up the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. It spans 14 states going from Georgia to Maine. It was first thought of in the 1930s. It came into fruition, and then I believe it was the late 40s when someone first decided, hey, I'm going to hike this entire thing in one go, and then the Thru-Hike was born, at least on the AT. And it has a very unique subculture associated with it. I think Thru-Hiking as a whole does, but the AT especially just has its own, like I said, subculture. It's just, I don't think there's anything quite like it.
Did you hike the whole Appalachian Trail or just part of it?
I did. I hiked all of it and I went NOBO or northbound. So I started in Georgia at Springer Mountain, and I hiked all the way up to Mount Katahdin, Maine. It took me about 5.5 months. And
is northbound the typical way that people hike it? Is that what most people tend to do?
Yes, most people do hike it northbound, and it's the most popular one. Others can go southbound, and they actually have something called a flip-flop, where you might start up at the north, or you might start at the south, and you go to the midway point. So you'd hike from Georgia to the midway point at the ATC headquarters, and then you would go up to Katahdin and hike down again, or any combination of that. And they're kind of leaning towards that these days to encourage people to do that, because it takes a lot less, there are a lot less people hiking northbound, so it's less crowded, and it's less harmful to the trail, the ecosystem surrounding the trail. So they do encourage that.
And what made you decide to hike the Appalachian Trail?
That's a funny and kind of sad story, the way you look at it, depending on how you look at it. So back in 2015, I was working a pretty decent job, pay-wise, but it was just, the monotony was just, I can't explain it. I don't like monotony. I like to switch things up. So the job was easy, but, I was overweight. I was depressed. I was drinking a little too much, to be honest. And one night, Friday night, I was just sitting in my recliner, probably had a few too many bourbons, and I just saw something on the internet alluding to the Appalachian Trail. And I was I was like, 2,000 miles and someone walks it in a go. I was like, that can't be right. So I started looking at it a little more. And at one point I fell asleep and I woke up and, I kept thinking about it. I was like, what is this? So I looked into it and I decided within, 10 minutes of being awake that I'm going to do this. This is incredible. This is what I need. So I bought a whole bunch of gear, and I'd never spent a single night outside before. I bought a bunch of gear that I didn't need. It's too heavy. My pack probably weighed 50 to 60 pounds. I had like 4 days worth of food for like just a little trial run to test my gear. I made it 8 miles before we set up camp, and then I just went back. We got on a service road and left, and I was pretty discouraged. I was thinking, no, I don't know if I can make it because 8 miles almost killed me. This is 2,000. And I kind of put on the back burner, but it was always in there. And then one day in 2018, we were on a conference call. My boss's boss said, well, we're going to shut this store down. You'll get a severance. The managers get a severance. And I just, smile got one on my face because I just realized this is it. I'm going to hike the AT now. And so I was unemployed for, the store closed in 18 in July. And I was on unemployment for a while, and then I decided to just kind of live off my savings. I sold almost all my things, got the severance, cashed out my 401k, and headed to Springer on March 31st is when I started. And then that was it. That's the story.
So you hadn't had a lot of experience backpacking before you started then?
No, my second night to ever sleep outside, other than maybe like in the backyard as a kid or something in like a pillow fort. I don't remember if I'd done that or not, but my second night to ever sleep outside was my first night on the AT.
Oh, wow. So did you have to do a lot of planning then before you left?
I overplanned, and we were talking about me working on a book. One of the things I really want to drive through in that book is a lot of people overplan. The first 3 lines I say, this is all you need to successfully hike the Appalachian Trail, and that's get something to sleep in and on, get enough food to go from Springer Mountain to Neal Gap, your first resupply, get a little bit of money, and then walk north until you see a big wooden sign that says Katahdin. It's a little more complicated than that, but I overplanned and overanalyzed and overread way too much. I mean, the basics of a thru hike is just walking. It's not. It doesn't have to be this huge thing. It's not. That's the fact that it's so alluring to so many people is it's not a big thing. It's just a walk in the woods, to quote Mr. Bryson.
Give me some ideas of things that you feel like you overplanned.
Yeah, it was gear mostly because people just go crazy, looking at gear. And it's important to find something that works. And I do recommend someone get something and trying it out. But they just think that a lot of, and I can really only speak for myself, but just things that I've noticed are people think that you have to have the $1,200 tent and you have to have these clothes. I had these expensive clothes that I bought, and I had I went all out on like my sleeping gear. You should just get what you can afford reasonably. I mean, I'm not saying to go get everything at like a dollar store, but I got too skinny for my shirts and they were like chafing me. And instead of buying like another $65 shirt from an outfitter, I just got a athletic shirt from Walmart for $8 and used that the rest of the trail. It just, I kept thinking that I would need this and this and this, but I didn't really. There were so many things I brought that I just didn't need. So that's probably what I'd say when people overanalyze. It's for their gear and logistics as well, I'd say.
Which gear do you feel like it was worthwhile, investing in retrospect?
So I'd say the big 3 are the only things you really need to spend the most money on, and you just spend as much as you're comfortable doing, and that's going to be your pack, your tent or hammock in my case, because I used a hammock, and then your sleeping bag or quilt in my case. So you want to try to get those as light, as comfortable as possible. Everything else is kind of just a bonus. Like I said with the shirts, you can just go to a cheap store and get a shirt. It's going to be fine. Maybe socks would be the only clothes I'd say to go out on if you're going to get some nice wool socks. But everything else, yeah.
Were you worried about weight then a lot? Were you ultralight?
No, I wasn't ultralight. I think ultralight depending on who you ask, is really considered sub, I don't know, 20. I was probably, when I first started, I ended up getting a new pack halfway through the trail. Mine had just, I bought it in 2015 when I first had my revelation. And, you know, packs have come a long way apparently in that time, since from 2015 to 19. So about in Virginia, I got a new pack, and my base weight was probably, without food and water, it was probably 20 pounds, 19, 20 pounds. So I wasn't really trying to. I don't like the whole go as light as possible to where you're just eating cold soaked couscous on a piece of cardboard at night.
I've read a lot of people do that. Well, not the cardboard part.
Yeah, or it's like this little thing, like this little thermarest pad. I actually had one as a backup because in the Smokies, you can't hammock. You have to stay in the you have to stay in the shelter unless it's filled up. Then you can hammock or tent, and it's not comfortable. It's not very comfortable at all. So I think there's a healthy balance between being too heavy and just being miserably uncomfortable. But for some people, the ultralight life, that's what they like, and they're happy doing that. They like to get as light as they can go, and kind of, it's almost like a survival thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just definitely not my cup of tea. And I recommend some comfort, because your biggest battle on the trail is going to be the mental battle. And if you can have like a nice place to sleep or something nice to eat after a long day, it really goes a long way.
So tell us what your typical day on the trail is like.
So for me, it may be a little different than most, because as I mentioned in my article, I kind of started accidentally intermittently fasting throughout the trip. So I'd wake up in the morning, usually get woken up by one of my trail party members. They'd come knock on my hammock bug shield, and they'd wake me up because they get up to cook breakfast and stuff. Not me though. I would just kind of hang out, and then while they were eating breakfast, I would pack up and get ready to go. And at first, they were so much faster than me, and I was going so slow because my knees hurt so bad. And, I was like 350 pounds hiking on the trail, and I would just try to leave before them so I could maintain a pace with them, because I was worried I was going to get left, which is something you shouldn't do on the trail. You should just hike at your own pace, because you can hurt yourself. So I would wake up and pack up, and I would start hiking. I'd usually, the first hour and a half or maybe two, I would usually just kind of listen to the sound of the morning, the birds, the nature, that kind of, I don't know, morning in the woods, kind of like, it's like a different, I can't really explain it, but it's just like a different aurora, I guess, around you in the morning times. You might have some sun coming in. So I was just kind of reflecting during that time. I'd walk and then I'd hike. I'd listen to a podcast or an audiobook or some music. About noon, I might pull over and have a 30-minute rest. Might have a snack. In the early parts, probably not. And then it was hike until camp. And then we would usually, when we get to camp, which is my favorite part of the day, or the shelter, I would have a snack then. I'd eat some of my snacks in my food bag. Then we'd set up camp, hang out a little bit. Then it'd be dinner time. And then after, hikers go to bed early on the AT. They call 9 p.m. hiker midnight. So we'd go to bed about like right as the sun started setting, or at least I would. And it's crazy how fast you go to sleep after you've hiked 15 or 20 miles a day. And then that'd be about it, unless we were going into town. That was just my day. You'd meet new people a lot. You'd see the best part is someone you met like back in Georgia. You're just walking along, and you just see that person you met 400 miles ago. I thought you'd never see him again. They're just sitting on a rock eating, summer sausage, just not even cutting it, just eating a foot-long piece of meat on a rock. And you're like, hey! That happened a lot, and that's probably my favorite experience socially, is just seeing somebody from hundreds of miles ago.
So did you tend to hike with people, or did you spend a lot of time hiking on your own and meeting up with people at different locations?
I'd say for the most part, that's how it goes for a lot of people. You don't really, at least for my group, we wouldn't hike like in a line very much. It would happen sometimes, but we usually had our different paces. So we would all just kind of pass and, just pass each other throughout the day. And then we might all stop somewhere at lunch. If I meet, Lifesaver or Sister, who are two members of my trail family, on a rock, I'd be like, we'll hang out for a little bit. But usually we would all meet up at the end of the day at the shelter. We'd have a predetermined spot where we'd say we're going to try to get to today. And it'd usually be a shelter, and that's where we'd meet up at the end of the day. So in the beginning, I'd see them in the morning, and I might see them in the day, but I usually wouldn't see them till the end of the day because they were so much faster. They would just they would already be sitting there getting ready for dinner when I just came trotting up. But I did get pretty quick later on. I was a pretty fast hiker after that, after I shed some pounds.
I guess after 6 months of training, you get a lot better. You see yourself improve.
Definitely. I didn't think, at first I didn't think I would ever do a 20-mile day. And I still don't like to do 20-mile days. We averaged about 15 or so. 15 was my comfort spot. I didn't like to push miles like a lot of people do. I just like to just kind of enjoy it, not get in too much of a hurry. But we had a few days, especially towards the end, where we hiked some big miles. We did the 100-mile wilderness really fast. I think we had we had like a 27-mile day in there and maybe a 28 after that. It was when we started hiking a lot. But anything past 20 for me, regardless of the shape I'm in, I'm not a big fan.
You mentioned that at the beginning of your hike, you were fasting for a big part of the day. Why did you decide to do that, or was that a decision?
It really wasn't a decision. With intermittent fasting, that's something I would do in the past for weight loss, and just because, I don't know, I just felt kind of better. So what I would do is I would only pretty much eat one meal a day. So I would just it was usually dinner. So I would just go all day without eating. And then about 6 o'clock when I was home from work, I would just have dinner. And the rationale for me was I could have a pretty big meal if you're only eating one meal a day. And when I got on the trail, I just kind of fell into that on accident, because breakfast would become, I'm not very hungry, so I'll just eat lunch, and then lunchtime would roll around and I'm hot and I'm tired and thirsty. So, and if I'm doing active things, I'm usually not very hungry. And then that turned into really just only eating once a day. I would, like I said, I would eat my snacks when I first got to camp, and then I would set up camp, and then I would eat dinner. And that just turned into one meal a day on accident. And I just kind of went with it because I was like, man, I am shedding the weight, like a lot. Like I was taking in I lost a total of 112 pounds. Yeah, I know it was. I've put like 30 back on because I'm going to blame the pandemic on that one. But yeah, it was a lot, and you don't really notice it too much when it's happening, I guess. But people would make remarks, and I would just be like, I'm still pretty tubby. I'm just gonna keep riding this one meal a day train. But that was silly of me because I was gonna lose weight regardless. I was burning like almost 10,000 calories a day, based on someone my size. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'6", so my maintenance is like a little over 3,000 calories a day. So as long as I was burning that much, I could have eaten whatever I wanted. I just kind of got an unhealthy obsession with losing weight.
Did it affect your performance at all by doing that?
I think so. I was a little more tired. I was definitely malnourished because, and this lasted for months after the trail, if I was to stand up, not even quickly, just stand up, I would have for 2 or 3 seconds, I would be dizzy. And I had some issues with my hair thinning on top, and that's just now starting to come back. And I got this weird, in the back of my head, I was getting a haircut in Virginia, and the stylist was cutting my hair, and she kind of gasped and said, "I didn't do that." And I was like, "What? Did what?" And she's like, "This." And she showed me just a bald spot, about the size of a nickel on the back bottom of my head. And I felt it, and it was just baby smooth. I was like, "Yeah, I don't think you did that. I don't know what's going on." And I kind of just ignored it. And it had the symptoms of this type of alopecia that I read can be caused by just stress. And I think my eating habits, exasperated that and made it worse.
Charles, I was really interested about how the weight loss impacted your performance on the trail, and I talked to a lot of people that have a lot of knee pain or hip pain. Your story was kind of inspirational. How the weight loss really transformed that. Can you maybe tell everyone a little bit, what you were dealing with at the start and how it got better?
That was probably the best part because I I played football from third grade until my sophomore year of college, and when I was in ninth grade, so about 14, I had knee surgery, and I'd always thought that my knees were bad just because of playing sports, but they weren't that bad. And when I started hiking the trail, my knees, it was the worst pain I've ever had in my knees. Not my life, but it was the descents. So if I'm walking down, it was like stabbing pain in both knees. And it used to just be my right one that would hurt. But I mean, I remember coming down Blood Mountain and Neal Gap. So it was like 4 days into the trail. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to quit because it's that bad. I tried walking backwards, and at one point I sat and I just like scooted down. And I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. But at one point I got some knee braces, and there was one point in the Smokies where we were sitting on one of these. There's a bunch of like balds and knobs and stuff up in the Smokies. It was on one of those, and I was sitting there, and these knee braces would get sweaty, and they would start chafing really badly. So when I'd sit on a rock, I would take them off and let my knees dry out a little bit. Well, I was standing up and I'd slapped them on a rock, and they had stuck there because they were so drenched with sweat. And I was walking around. I was like, man, my knees don't really hurt too bad. And I was like, I'll try this. We'll see. I mean, we're about to go down a mountain. We'll see what's going on. And I started doing it. I was just like, my knees do not hurt anymore. Like, what is going on? And I've just kind of put two and two together. I was like, oh, it's because I've lost 45 pounds. So I threw those knee braces away because they would not. It would have been cruel to put them in a hiker box. So I just threw them away, and I never had the knee braces again. And my knees, I would have a little twang every once in a while if it was an especially long day but yeah, knee pain was gone. I mean, it went from an everyday thing, just existing, my knees would hurt, to being just like a little, take some ibuprofen, we'll be fine. And that was remarkable to me because, I thought I'm going to be that guy in age 40 who has, the knee replacement surgery. And so far they're still hopping along just fine.
So once you stopped fasting and you started eating more regularly, was your quality of food changing at that time, or what were you eating?
The hiker diet is not known for its a typical one, isn't known. My typical resupply was potato chips, peanuts, which peanuts would be a good one. Little candy bars. I would bring cheese a lot, which surprisingly lasts for a while. And if you put it in the middle of your pack, it stays fairly cool. One point I had a stick of butter I brought with me when it was a little colder. Dinners would be, I would either get a box of Annie's mac and cheese and a little single serving slice of Spam. And I would cook the mac and cheese and just cut the Spam up and put it in there. I would do, if I could find them, dehydrated red beans and rice was a big one. Stovetop stuffing I did a few times in the beginning, and it was pretty good, but one day I was just like, it just hit me wrong, and I just never wanted it again on the trail. But mostly what my resupplies were snacks and then dinners. I didn't do breakfasts or lunches. And then I took a multivitamin very briefly, which I should have been doing that the entire trail because I think I would have fared a lot better had I had a multivitamin, even at me doing the intermittent fasting.
And had you planned your meals ahead of time and sent yourself your resupplies?
No, I don't recommend doing that. That's something I try to tell people. Unless you have like a dietary restriction, such as maybe someone's a vegan, they might want to do mail drops because it can be hard. Because sometimes you're resupplying at a gas station. So it can be really hard to, find the things you need. If you don't have any kind of restrictions, I don't recommend the mail drops because a lot of times you might get a whole bunch of something to send yourself that you think's good, but it's day 140, you're in, wherever, and you're just like, I am tired of this meal, but I've got 60 more of them queued up to come down the line. You never know what you're going to like see or get in the hankering for. Sometimes I'd be like I hate the restaurant Subway. Do not like, I think all of their sandwiches taste the same. But every once in a while on the trail, I'd be 2 or 3 days out of town. I'd be like, man, I'm going to get a foot long. I'm going to put roast beef on it, like onions. And, it's just, you never know what you're going to want. I guess is what I'm saying. So I don't recommend the mail drop unless you need it. And it's just kind of trouble too, having to deal with like the mailing things. I don't recommend it. I know people who did it and they liked it just fine. But if I was just telling an average person like me, I'd say just buy food at the grocery store or whatever.
For people thinking about doing the AT, how often are you going through towns or able to resupply? Is it like the Pacific Crest Trail where you have some pretty long time out, or is it more regular that you can get food?
It's way more regular. I would say at least you'll have access to town. I mean, a lot of times the trail goes through town. Like, so we went through several towns where Main Street was the AT. It's not like the PCT. That's the trail I want to do next. I'm a little concerned about doing that one because on the AT, I'm trying to think of how many days in between stops. I mean, maybe at the most 5. And that's not even saying like, even if there'll be points to where you could get like a 10 or 20 minute ride into a town. You're not very, until you get up into like Maine, you're very close to everything. Like I think, yeah, I'd say maybe 4 to 5 days at most. It would be our resupplies. Sometimes we would choose to do a longer resupply on purpose, and we'd go like 6 or 7 days. But if you want to, you could easily I'd say 2 or 3 days find a place to resupply.
So that would mean it would limit how much you're carrying and how heavy your pack is too then if you're resupplying more frequently.
Yes. If you can, and a thing that I like to do was, and a lot of people do, is if you go from town into the trail, you can bring something like from a restaurant. Like I was talking about Subway earlier. I would bring a couple of footlongs in my pack and take them to camp that night. And that stuff's heavy, but if you just take it to camp and eat it, you're golden, and you don't have to worry about getting something light. So that's something that I recommend people doing for their diet. If they want to, a lot of people don't bring, like an apple would be kind of heavy, in your pack, and it's kind of bulky. But if you wanted to bring like some fresh fruit or even like a salad with you that first day on trail after town and eat it for dinner or lunch, you could do that just fine. It's just extra weight for a few miles. And I did that a lot. I wish I would have done that more with healthier options. I think that would have been, I would have fared a lot better. I think I made it needlessly hard on myself with my diet choices.
And besides resupplying when you were in town, are there other things that a town day entailed?
Yes, town days are the best days on the trail, at least for me, especially if you're taking a zero. And a 0 day is a day, for anyone who doesn't know, where you hike 0 miles. So, and there's also a Nero where you hike near 0 miles. Now, what constitutes a Nero is up for debate. I considered anything under 10 miles is a Nero, but some of the hardcore guys, there's graffiti along the trail that say like anything below 30 miles is a Nero, which is said tongue in cheek, I hope. But yeah, so you have what we call town chores. So when you get into town, your main things are going to be your resupply. So you want to resupply and laundry, and you want to do your laundry. So a lot of hotels you'll stay in will have laundry. Sometimes it's included. Sometimes you pay for it. Others don't. You have to go to a laundromat. What we try to do we like to make it to where we were hiking into town and we get up early and kind of get there mid-afternoon, get all of our town chores done. And then that next day, full zero, and we don't have anything to do except for just lounge around and just do whatever. But laundry, and then for others who do the mail drops, it'd be laundry, resupply, go to the post office. Sometimes you want to get some new gear. I went through like 10 trekking poles, so my frequent town chore for me would be going to get some more trekking poles that I've broken.
And how often did you take 0 days? Did you plan them out?
Yes, we plan them. I recommend at least one a week, just for some people would go longer. We would typically go once a week. I would start. There would be times where we'd be like 10 days on trail, where we'd go to town, but we just went in there, resupplied, and then got out. We didn't even stay anywhere, and those started to get taxing. So someone like me, they're expensive, but if you have a group, it's not as expensive to stay in a hotel, but it still costs more than just sleeping in the shelter for free. But I recommend once a week. That's for me personally, that's what was best for me mentally and physically. Just a day to where you could and you can take zeros also on trail. I don't think we ever did. But if you had like a really nice camp spot, maybe with a swimming spot or a cool shelter, you could take a zero there too. I know people who did, but we typically took our zeros in a hotel or hostel.
I didn't realize there were shelters on the trail.
Yes, there's a bunch. I used to know the number. There's a lot. I mean, you can pretty much stay at a shelter. There's usually a shelter within it 10 miles of each other along the whole trail. They were built as the AT was being built, so a lot of them are like from the 30s, and they were built by the I forget, it's like the CCC. It was this workforce that was set up, and it gave people jobs during the Depression, and they built those shelters, and then also built the trail. But yeah, they're everywhere, and there's all kinds of different ones. There's lean-tos, which it's just an open-faced shed. Some are upper deckers. There's one that was like 3 stories. It had like a loft on the second floor. There's good ones and bad ones. There's one outside of Damascus that's like, I have a picture of myself in front of it, and I'm like, the top of the door goes like to here on me. And it's kind of slanted too. I was like, I don't know who would stay in here because it's just tiny. Like, I think if I slept in there, no one else could fit. And it looked like it was about to blow over. So you got stuff like that. And then places like Massachusetts, like almost all the shelters there are phenomenal and have like little bunks. They have like little raised platforms for you to put your stuff on. The variations are there's endless variations of the shelters on the AT.
So what was your favorite part of the trail?
I would have to say New England, especially Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. I just love that part of the country, and I'm really glad to be moving kind of close up there soon. But if I could just pick anywhere to live, and it'd be a cabin in rural Maine. Just that part of it was just the trail's really nice. You're walking through the White Mountains, and when you're coming out of So when you leave Virginia, you kind of leave the mountains for a bit through West Virginia and Maryland. It's a nice change up because you're finally glad to be done with Virginia because it's the biggest state in the trail that you will go through. But then New York and New Jersey are nice. Pennsylvania is something else. It kind of has a reputation on the trail that a lot of people don't like it. They call it Rocksylvania because it's filled with rocks on the trail, and there's not too many views. I don't want to make fun of Pennsylvania too much. It was fine. But just to be back in like real mountains when you got up into like Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, it was something else because I'd kind of started losing steam, especially in Pennsylvania. That's where I was probably at my lowest mentally. So it kind of really picked me up to be back in those mountains, and until I realized I had to climb them, and that's where there's a bunch of 4,000 footers, but it's still nice, very beautiful, probably the most beautiful part of the trail, in my opinion.
And you were talking earlier about the trail having a certain kind of culture that was quite distinct. Tell us a bit more about that.
The AT subculture is something else. We have our own jargon, and you pick it up fast, but I would have to say for, someone who didn't know anything about it, it's one part hippie. Well, it's probably 2 parts hippie. There's a lot of like hippie types out there, but then there's not. The AT culture is kind of an enigma. It's like everything belongs. I've seen all types of people. A lot of, I would see a trail hiking group or a tramily, which is a trail and family. That's what they call their groups. Be comprised of like an 18-year-old who's just out of high school, a couple of college students, and then a 65-year-old retiree. And they would hike the trail together and, stay in hotels and hang out. I mean, where else and what other subculture do you see that kind of group other than like, a family going to Denny's for the grandfather's birthday. I mean, where else does that exist? And it's like I said, it's its own jargon. So I said it earlier with NOBO for northbound. Then there's SOBO, southbound. There's a purist. So a purist is someone who does not deviate from the trail. They can be kind of annoying if they're like there's the purists that they just do it for them, but then there's the purists who think that if you don't do it the right way, you're not a real thru hiker. And so a purist would, let's say there's a road crossing on the trail to where you'd get a ride into town. So a super hardcore purist would mark where they stopped and got off the trail, and they would make sure that they went right back to where they got off at and then continued hiking. They wouldn't miss, a foot of the trail. Whereas, someone who didn't really care, they might say, oh yeah, we're in that parking lot over there. It's 100 feet up where they got off, or, maybe it's a mile up, whatever. And they wouldn't, they'd just be like, whatever, I'm just here to hike. So they can be kind of annoying if they're the hardcore ones. If they're just doing it for themselves, more power to them. I talked earlier about the big three. That's one of the things. We call ourselves hiker trash. I don't know if that I think in other trails that's a thing. I think it started like somebody just yelled at some hikers walking on the side of the road and called them hiker trash, and it kind of just became we commandeered their insult, and we just call ourselves hiker trash.
I've heard of that on the PCT, hiker trash.
Just things like that. Yes, I'm sure that it goes on most of the long distance trails. The hiker trash thing. A lot of it bleeds over, and then we also have trail names, which that's a thing on other trails as well. I imagine, or I know it's a thing on the PCT. But let's say I got my trail name on the AT. If I did the PCT, I would probably introduce myself with my trail name. My girlfriend actually still calls me by my trail name. She doesn't like to call me Charles because it just doesn't feel right. So they run deep. My trail name is Buffet. There is. I actually got because your trail name, you could make your own up, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like weird if you because the guy in school who says, call me Ace. And everyone's like, no one gave you that nickname. That's lame. So it's kind of like that with trail names. You can do it, or you could say like, yeah, I got this name on like another trail. But I don't know. You're supposed to be named something. So you're supposed to you do something and like you slip on some water and someone calls you like, I don't know, Slipper or something. I'm bad at naming people, I guess. But what happened was I got my trail name 10 minutes into my thru hike because there's an orientation at Springer Mountain if you register and everything, and there's someone with the ATC who kind of gives you a rundown. He teaches you about leave no trace, how to hang a bear bag, things like that. And then at the end, he asks if there are any questions. He's like, does anyone want to know, see how to tie a bear bag again? Anyone want to know about the best buffets on the trail? Whatever. That was kind of a joke. And I raised my hand. I said, yeah, let's hear about those buffets, man. And so he told me about them, and I think I went to all of them, and they were good recommendations. But this guy at one point said, hey, like at Amicalola State Park where you start, there's like 50,000 stairs you have to climb before you actually get to the real AT. I wish someone had told me that. But the guy, we'd stopped, and it was like the first flight of stairs, and I was just like, just dying. Because I had my heavy pack with food and I was fat, and this guy was like, tapped me on the shoulder, and he was like, hey, I got a trail name for you, Mr. Buffet, because you asked that guy about buffets. And I was just like, all right. And I didn't kind of like it at first because you have to accept, like, no, someone can't name you like Buttface or something and be like, oh, that's your name now. You have to accept it. So I didn't really accept it at first, but then later I did. I just dropped the Mr. and I just Buffet. And that's how my name became Buffet, is I asked the man about buffets, and I got it 10 minutes in, which I don't know if that's a record or not, but I think it's got to be close.
You mentioned you met your girlfriend, I think, on day 2, which, believe it or not, we just talked to somebody else who met their partner on day 2 of the PCT, which is, kind of surprising. But tell us about, finding love on the AT. Is this a good place to for singles?
You don't want to get because word travels fast on the AT, and you don't want to do it anyway just because it's terrible. But you don't want to it'll come if you're looking for it. I think you just don't want to get that reputation of being creepy because it's like a game of telephone. Like if there was someone on the trail who was like behaving poorly, and it travels fast because you'll pass like Phil coming this way to get water, and you'll be like, yeah, that guy was creepy, and then he tells someone, and you just go. So you don't want to get that vibe. Like I was not looking for a relationship when I went on the AT. I had no intention of it. I was fat. I was smelled terrible because I was living in the woods, and the last thing on my mind was finding a relationship. And at first, it wasn't a relationship. It was just a friendship at first. But we met on day 2. She had started later in the day, so she didn't stay at the Springer Mountain Shelter. She stayed at the one back, and that's almost where I stayed because I was so tired. I almost stayed there. I probably would have met her the first night, but we met the second day, and we just there was a huge group of us that kind of splintered off, and then it became 4 of us. We called ourselves the Slow Patrol. But it would there's this one guy, he got mad that we called ourselves that because we were always catching up with him, and he was taking it as an insult that we were calling ourselves slow. But so it was just a friendship for a while, and then we it stayed a friendship for the most part on the trail, but we kind of both knew there was something there. And then after the trail, you go from how relationships really can blossom on there is like, let's say you meet someone at a bowling alley, and the relationship that exists within 6 months is a lot different than one on the trail, because if you meet someone in your real life, you're not seeing them every day. You're not spending every single day with them for 6 months. It's amplified because you're with that person all the time. If you're in a hotel, you're in the same room, you're having dinner with them every day. Friendships and relationships alike harden and blossom faster on the AT. And I think that's why you see a lot of relationships like that, because it's such a hard environment to be in. If you can make it through that, it's very intense.
So I'm sure there's lots of people who think about doing a through hike, and they might be surprised at how much it costs. Some might think it's going to cost nothing. Other people might think it's, they're used to going on vacations that cost $1,000 or $2,000 a week. So, after doing the AT, what should people expect for kind of a regular through hike in your experience in terms of how much they should budget?
Budget as much as you can, because the more money you have, the less you have to worry about, and the more you can enjoy things like hotels. A lot of people would take a trip to DC or New York because you're pretty close along the way. That's something I got to stay in New York because my Lifesavers, her dad lived there, so we got to hang out with there for a while. But not to get too off topic, they say to budget $1 a mile of the AT, but I don't think that's right. I spent about almost $7,000, but I was not as frugal as a lot of people. Some people legitimately can do it for $2,000. Some people have done it with nothing. It's just depending on how much you have to spend. I knew a guy who we'd go by town and we would see him with his shirt off with a shovel or a pickaxe, just, doing a day, he was being a day laborer to pay for his through hike. Others, they call, if you go all out, it's called platinum blazing. And that's if you just, you don't have to worry about money. But I would say 6,000 to 10,000 fits most people's budget. That's probably average. It's anywhere between 6,000 to 10,000. You can absolutely do it for less, and you could spend 20 if you were really trying to. But your most expensive costs are going to be food and lodging, and you don't have to spend a single night in a hotel if you don't want to. You can stay in the bunkhouses of some hostels. They've kind of gone up in price, but you can still find one for like $20 or $30. Some cost as much as a hotel does if you have 2 people. So it's better to just be in a private hotel for others. But you don't have to do that. You could just eat white rice and sleep in the shelters the whole time and do that the AT just fine. That wouldn't have been enjoyable for me, and it's not for most people. But yeah, 6 or 10, I think you're good. in between those ranges.
And so, how do you feel like your perspective has changed since doing the AT?
I'm not lazy, but I don't like to. This sounds terrible, but I don't like to work. And what I mean by that is I don't like to do a job. So I can, go out and, rustle cattle or something. It's not that I don't enjoy physical labor. I just, whatever this 9 to 5 grind is that we just live with, you do that till you're 65, and then they give you a gold watch, and then you have your retirement money, but you don't have the energy because the best years of your life you spent clicking away on a keyboard. I just kind of realized I was never going to be happy doing that, and I'm not. And when I went on the AT, I didn't realize that. I just felt that like, oh, I'm just one of those guys who life's not that fun for. I can't really find purpose in doing a job. But when I went on the AT, I said, this is the lifestyle that's for me. I realized that not knowing what day of the week it was awesome. Like, I don't care if it's Monday. It doesn't matter. I would look at my phone and be like, oh, it's Thursday. I thought it was like Tuesday. You just don't have any sense of schedule. You don't have any sense of like in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, the gas bill's coming up. Nope. You just know that there's a mountain ahead of you and you just got to climb it and get to the other side. And that's it. Just out of the, to be cliche, the rat race. And that the perspective it gave me is that not only did I find something a lifestyle that makes me happy, I found that it's okay to not be in the rat race. There's nothing wrong with not working away at a job and working your way up the ladder and getting, the bigger house and the nicer car and keeping up with the Jones, as they say. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think society kind of looks down on alternative lifestyles like that, and I'm not sure why, because I think that's the happiest I've ever been in my life was on the AT. Looking back, at the time, there were a lot of times I was miserable and I wish I was, in the office. But looking back now, it's just, that's where I need to be, is somewhere in the woods with my life on my back and thinking, who cares what day it is? It doesn't matter. Every day's a weekend for me.
That really resonated with me in terms of just the simplicity of, there's just your day is you're just walking and, sometimes you're talking, but you get, whoever you're hiking with, and this is even just going for a week-long backpack, but you can have some interesting conversations or just have time where you zone out. And I always seem to have great realizations when I'm not thinking. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, hey, this problem I've had, I've just solved it. But there's no distractions. It's just you're doing one thing that doesn't take a lot of effort, and it's just really. I was thinking earlier this week, it's a bit like meditation almost, because there's very little input and you're just kind of with yourself and just super comfortable, but you're breathing like crazy if you're going uphill, if you've got a heavy pack. But I think you described it really well, Charles. Just there's something beautiful about being out on a through hike or even just out on a few days backpacking. You can almost get the same thing.
Yeah, and Richard, I think you make a good point when you say it's almost like meditation. I've tried to sit there on the floor and meditate before, and I've just never been able to I don't know. I think it's just, you're right. If I'm just zoning out doing this, and your mind, and you have these epiphanies, and you figure out things from your past that you come to terms with. I mean, it is like meditation, and it's really healthy for me, at least mentally. It was.
So this has been great, Charles. I really like the approach of comfort in doing a through hike, because almost everyone I talk to, they're talking about grams, and they're cutting their socks down and they're cutting all the straps off their backpack, and they're spending thousands of dollars to save ounce here, a quarter ounce there. And I've always been a bit like you, where it's nice to have some comfort while you're doing it. So I think that was great. I'm sure people might have some questions. How can they find you? Do you have a social media handles or other ways people can get in touch with you?
I do. I'm only on Instagram. I don't have Facebook or Twitter currently, but you can find me on Instagram at Feeling Arkansasy 79. And You should see me on there. I post every once in a while, not as much as these days because I'm not around such beautiful mountains and living that lifestyle. But someday soon, I'll be out there again, and you can follow my next adventure if you would wish.
Charles also wrote a really great article on 10 adventures that I encourage everyone to have a read through, kind of giving a bit more detail on his story on the Appalachian Trail. I'll put that link in the show notes. And thanks, Charles. This was really great hearing your story about the AT, and actually just made me want to get outside and for summer to be here and go hiking. How about you, Karen? Do you ever dream about doing a through hike?
I've looked at it. I did sometime on the John Muir Trail, but nothing like that length of time. Only 9 days, and we had to plan for that one because we had to mail resupplies to ourselves for that one.
Well, you've got some tips now if you want to plan your own through hike to have a bit more comfort, because I believe you're a bit of a comfort fan as well, and you're not necessarily just focused on the minimizing the weight.
No, it's all about this whole experience.
All right. Well, tune in next week for our next story on the 10 Adventures podcast. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me both. Y'all take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. If you liked it, why not give us a review? Better yet, subscribe and get inspired again and again. Also, if you want to find your own adventures, why not check out 10adventures.com, where you can use our free resources to plan your own trip or book a tour in over 60 countries and make your own epic memories on your next adventure.